I'm holding the key to a house that doesn't exist anymore. Not in any way that matters. The key is old iron, weighty, the kind of thing you'd imagine unlocking a castle gate. It's warm from my palm. The teeth are worn down just enough to prove it lived a long life being turned by people who believed they owned what was inside. A white designer heel sinks into gravel as I step onto a construction site that used to be a masterpiece. Dust floats in the mountain air like pale ash. 10 minutes ago, I watched a wrecking ball swing through the master bedroom of a $2.2 million estate in the hills of Aspen. A chandelier shattered midair like an exploding star. Glass rained down in perfect, cruel slow motion. My mother is currently screaming in the backseat of a police cruiser, mascara bleeding down her cheeks like grief she can't monetize. My father is standing stiff beside the orange tape, staring at a deputy like the man might suddenly remember he's Arthur Hale and the world is supposed to bend around his name. But it isn't bending. Not today. Today, he's realizing for the first time in 60 years that family is not a legal defense for fraud. My name is Alara. I'm dirt. I'm a forensic architect. My job is to look at buildings that have collapsed and tell the court exactly which bolt, which beam, or which lie caused the tragedy. I find the structural failure before the dust even settles. I translate chaos into evidence. I turn denial into diagrams. I spent my whole life thinking the structural failure in my family was me. That I was the cold one, the difficult one, the one who couldn't just let things go. Because I demanded receipts while my younger sister, Sophie, offered vibes and healing energy and a suspicious allergy to responsibility. But today, standing on this torn open earth, holding this ridiculous heavy key, I finally found the real crack in the foundation. And I didn't just find it. I demolished the whole house to get to it. My parents' favorite hobby is rewriting history. They don't do it loudly. They do it like accountants. Quietly. With confidence. With a smile that says, "My father, Arthur, believes in legacy the way some men believe in religion, something you're born into, something you obey, something you use to justify whatever you want. My mother, Lillian, believes in image. She can paint decay gold if the lighting is right. She can cry on command and still check her reflection in a spoon. And Sophie believes the universe owes her a soft life because she was born sensitive. I was born observant. That was my crime. In our house, there was a very specific kind of math. It went like this. My success was a family asset. My sister's failures were unfortunate acts of God that required a collective bailout. If I achieved something, it was proof our bloodline was special. If Sophie messed up, it was proof the world was cruel. And if I refused to clean up her mess, then I was cruel. I learned early that love in my family wasn't a feeling. It was a transaction. 12 years ago, I was 22, and I thought I'd finally escaped. I'd won a full-ride scholarship to study architecture in Milan. Milan. Not just a city, an entire worldview. A place where design mattered. Where buildings weren't just shelters but statements. Where the streets looked like someone had decided they deserved beauty. I remember standing in my cramped bedroom, staring at my acceptance letter like it was a passport. I remember the smell of fresh cardboard as I taped my last moving box shut. I remember my hands shaking as I folded my plane ticket into my wallet. 2 days before my flight, I went downstairs and heard my parents whispering in the kitchen. Whispering was never normal in our house. We did everything performatively. Loud laughter, loud criticism, loud support. So I stopped at the doorway, and I heard my father say, casually, like he was discussing lawn care, "It's handled. The funds were rerouted this morning." My mother murmured something soft and approving. Then I heard Sophie's voice, bright and airy. "Bali has a totally different frequency, Mom. I can't do my healing here." My stomach did something strange, like it was trying to evacuate my body. I walked in. "What funds?" I asked. 4 faces turned to me in a perfectly rehearsed tableau of innocence. My father's expression didn't even twitch. "Alara, you're home early. What funds were rerouted?" My mother smiled, like I'd complimented her curtains. "Sweetheart, don't take that tone." I stepped closer, eyes on the stack of papers by his elbow. There it was. A waiver. My name typed neatly at the top. My signature at the bottom. Except it wasn't my signature. It was my father's idea of my signature, too smooth, too confident, too wrong. I picked it up. "What is this?" My father didn't flinch. "It's a declination form." "What?" "You declined the stipend portion. The tuition is still covered." "The stipend pays for housing," I said, voice sharpening. Food, materials, transportation. He nodded once, as if I were explaining something he'd already mastered. And the stipend was donated back to a community fund. I stared at him. My mother's hand drifted to her necklace like she was praying. Sophie was already looking bored. You forged my signature, I said. My father's voice stayed calm. We made a family decision. A family decision? I repeated slowly, tasting the absurdity. About my scholarship. My father leaned back in his chair like a judge. Alara, you have a brain that can build empires. Sophie doesn't. You owe it to the blood in your veins to level the playing field. That's what family does. Level the playing field. That phrase hit me like a slap, because the field wasn't uneven. Sophie had been handed equipment, coaches, and a private jet, and I was still expected to carry her on my back. I looked at Sophie. You knew? She shrugged, wide-eyed like a saint. I didn't ask for it. The universe just... You're going to Bali, I said, voice trembling, with my scholarship money. Sophie smiled sweetly. It's a spiritual retreat. It's for my growth. I turned back to my father. You stole my future. My mother's eyes flashed with something cold. Don't be dramatic. You can go to school here. I earned Milan. You earned being part of this family, my father said. And there it was, the entitlement, the ownership. We raised you, fed you, put clothes on your back. I stared at the forged signature again, then at his hands. Hands that had signed away my life like it was a coupon. 2 days later, my plane left without me. Milan happened for someone else. I stayed. I worked 3 jobs. I went to a local program. Finished at the top of my class anyway, because spite is an excellent fuel source when you learn to control it. Then I built my firm Apex Forensics from a laptop in a windowless basement. No investors. No family help. No applause. Just me, concrete dust in my hair, blueprints spread across a table that wobbled because I couldn't afford a decent desk. And in all those years, I never asked my parents for a dime. I never even asked for an apology. I just stopped giving them access. Because I learned something important. A locked door doesn't need to argue. 2 years ago, my parents called me like nothing had happened. Like my scholarship hadn't been a corpse they buried under family. My father's voice was unusually warm. Alara, your mother and I have been thinking. That phrase is always a warning. We're retiring, he continued. We want to do something meaningful, something lasting. My mother chimed in, all sweetness. A legacy, darling, a final home, somewhere beautiful. And then he said the word that always hooked me, the word designed to snag the part of me that still wanted to believe. Aspen. They'd bought a plot of land in the hills with their life savings, they said. They wanted me, their brilliant architect daughter, to design and oversee the build of their final home. They played the legacy card. They played the we're getting older card. They played the we've always believed in you card, which is the funniest lie my mother has ever told with a straight face. I told myself I could do it cleanly, professionally, through my firm, contracts, paper trails, boundaries, and maybe, just maybe, I could end this war with something that looked like peace. So I agreed. I drew the plans. I hired the contractors. I managed the $1.5 million budget like a general directing a war I wasn't allowed to lose. I personally added $700,000 of my own money to make it perfect. Not because they deserved perfection. Because I did. Because I was building something with my name on it. Heated floors. Reinforced glass. A cantilevered terrace that made the mountains look like they were part of the interior design. A fortress of luxury. A glass and stone statement that said, I survived you. My parents walked through the framed skeleton of the house during construction and cried like they were watching a dream solidify. My mother hugged me too tightly and whispered, I always knew you'd take care of us. My father clapped my shoulder like I was a favorite employee. And Sophie? Sophie visited once, wore a hat that cost more than most people's rent, spun in a circle on the subfloor, and said, Om Ga, it's giving, healing. I didn't laugh. I did one thing they didn't notice. I didn't put the house in their name. I put it into an operating LLC owned by my firm, Apex Forensics Holdings. Then I attached a life tenancy clause for them. They could live there forever, for free, as long as they followed the operational covenants. Basic stuff. Don't sublet. Don't encumber. Don't attempt to transfer ownership. Don't bring in third parties for commercial use. Don't treat my work like a piggy bank. They signed the papers without reading them. Why would they read them? I was the useful daughter. The tool. The one who always fixed things. Tools don't get questioned. Tools get used. Last month, I drove up to Aspen unannounced. I hadn't been to the house in weeks. Work had been brutal. A collapse case in Denver, a courtroom battle in Seattle. My life was cement and evidence and sleepless nights. But something had been itching at the back of my mind. That familiar feeling you get when the floor under you isn't squeaking yet, but you can tell it will. I turned into the driveway, and there it was. Sophie's $120,000 electric SUV parked like it belonged there. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. Then I saw a second car, sleek, black, unfamiliar. A man leaned against it, checking his phone, the kind of posture that screamed confidence purchased with other people's money. And I knew him. Not personally, but professionally. Silas Reeve, a predatory flipper from the gray market of real estate. The kind of man who circles distressed properties like a shark circles a bleeding seal. My stomach dropped. I parked, got out, and walked toward the front door with my heels crunching gravel like a countdown. Inside, the house smelled like expensive candles and betrayal. My mother was in the kitchen pouring wine, 2 glasses. Silas was seated at the island like he'd already claimed the place. My father stood beside him holding a pen. Sophie was on the couch, scrolling through Pinterest, eyes glazed, looking at yachts like she was shopping for groceries. My mother looked up and beamed. "Elara!" Surprise. Silas smiled at me in a way that made my skin crawl, like I was an obstacle he'd already priced out. My father's voice held that old patronizing growl. "We were just discussing an opportunity." "An opportunity," I repeated, stepping closer. "In my house. Our house." My mother corrected gently, like I was confused. I looked at the papers on the counter. A lease agreement, a renovation proposal, a financing packet, and then, because the universe loves a punchline, a quitclaim deed. My breath went cold. "Leverage," my mother said brightly, gesturing at the documents. "Silas thinks we can leverage the property." "Leverage?" I asked. "The house is a residence, not an ATM." "Actually," my father said, tapping the papers with the pen, "we've already signed a sublease agreement. Silas is turning the lower level into a private wellness club." Sophie finally looked up. "It's going to be so cute. Like, ambient, exclusive, a vibe," my father continued, as if he were reading a grocery list. "And we're taking out a second mortgage on the equity to fund Sophie's new luxury crystal line." I stared at him. "You're what?" He sighed, like I was slow. "It's called investing, Elara. Sophie needs capital. And you built this house with so much wasted value. It's just sitting here." "It's sitting here because you're living in it," I said, voice tight. My mother's smile thinned. "Don't be bitter, you have plenty." I reached for the quitclaim deed. I scanned it, and there it was, my signature again. Forged. Clumsy this time, like someone who'd practiced it in a hurry. They hadn't just tried to lease it, they'd tried to steal the entire LLC. Transfer ownership from my firm to my father. A theft dressed up as paperwork. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. "You forged my signature," I said quietly. My father met my eyes without shame. "We corrected an oversight." "Oversight," I echoed. "You have enough, Elara," he snapped. "You're greedy. We're taking back what you owe us for raising you." My mother added, softly vicious, "Family shares." Sophie smiled like she was watching a movie. "Don't make it weird." I felt something inside me settle. Not anger. Not sadness. A clarity so sharp it could cut glass. Because suddenly, everything made sense. They hadn't changed. They'd just aged. And I'd been pretending time would turn thieves into parents. I looked at Silas. He raised his glass like we were celebrating. I said very calmly, "I'd leave if I were you." Silas laughed. "The deed is filed, honey. I'm the partner now." I smiled. "No," I said. "You're a trespasser." CTA 1. If you've ever been the responsible one in a family of chaos, if you've ever been treated like the emergency fund instead of a human being hit, like and subscribe right now. You're going to want to see how this contract ends. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the wine in my mother's face, even though part of me wanted to watch it stain her perfect kitchen like a warning. I just reached into my bag and pulled out my tablet. My father's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" I turned the screen toward them. A report filled the display. Stamped. Signed, "Official, for Forensic Structural Audit, County Building Department, filed 4 hours ago." Silas squinted. "What is that?" It's the difference between you walking away and you getting devoured, I said. My mother blinked rapidly. Ilara, stop being dramatic, my father scoffed. You can't intimidate us with paperwork. I tapped the screen. A series of diagrams appeared, red overlays on the structural plans. Support columns highlighted, load paths traced, critical points circled in aggressive crimson. When I built this house, I said, voice low, I knew you couldn't help yourselves. My father stiffened. I knew the moment I gave you something beautiful, you'd try to sell it, or skin it for parts, or use it to fund Sophie's next hobby. Sophie rolled her eyes. It's not a hobby, it's a brand. I didn't look at her. So, I continued, I built a fail-safe into the bones of this project. Silas's smile faltered. That's not a thing. Oh, it's a thing, I said. You just don't know how the thing works. I swiped to the section titled Operational Covenants Enforcement Mechanisms. The covenants you signed, I said, looking directly at my father, state that any attempt to encumber the property, sublet it, or alter the deed without the trustee's consent triggers an immediate structural hazard condemnation. My father laughed, loud and dismissive. You can't condemn a house because you're mad. I tilted my head slightly. I'm not condemning it because I'm mad, Dad. Then I tapped the next page. Material compliance verification incomplete. I'm condemning it because I documented the use of substandard, non-compliant materials in the primary support columns. Silence hit the room like a slammed door. My mother's wine glass stopped halfway to her mouth. Sophie's phone lowered slowly. Silas stood up so fast his chair scraped. My father's face changed just a fraction. Fear. What? My mother whispered. I kept my voice soft. I'm a forensic architect. I let the words sink in like poison. I know exactly how to build a house that looks like a palace, but, on paper, is a death trap. My mother's lips parted. I held up a hand. Listen. I zoomed in on the section about concrete certification. I used a specific grade of concrete that is perfectly safe for 50 years. My father's breath seemed to return. Then what's the problem? The problem, I said, is that it's safe only if its compliance record is clean. I tapped the audit filing stamp again. By filing this audit, I have flagged the material as unverifiable. Silas's voice cracked. Unverifiable means... It means, I said. The insurance company won't touch it. The bank won't lend against it. The city can't ignore it. My father's voice rose. You're lying. I smiled slightly. Check the county portal. Silas snatched his phone, fingers flying. My mother's hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the counter. Sophie whispered, You wouldn't. I looked at her for the first time, really looked. 12 years of being carried. 12 years of entitlement wearing different outfits. I would, I said. Because you all taught me something. My father slammed his hand down. You can't destroy your own asset. I didn't destroy it, I said gently. I locked it. Silas read something on his phone and went pale. There's a vacate order. My mother gasped like she'd been shot. My father stared at the screen, then at me, like he was seeing a stranger in his daughter's skin. The only way to fix the record, I continued, is for the architect of Record Me to sign a recertification. I leaned forward slightly, which I will never do. Silas backed away from the island like it was on fire. My mother's voice shook. Ilara, please. As of this moment, I said, the city has marked this property as a structural hazard. Uninsurable, unsellable, unmortgageable. I let the last word land like a judge's gavel. Congratulations, I added softly. Your palace is now legally radioactive. The next 48 hours were a masterpiece of predictable panic. They tried to charm me. My mother called and cried. My father called and threatened. Sophie texted me long paragraphs about betrayal and trauma and how my energy was violent. Then they tried to sue. They claimed elder abuse. They claimed I was unstable. They claimed everything except the truth. They got caught. My lawyer's name is Maren Voss. She's the kind of woman who makes sharks look like goldfish. In court, Maren didn't even start with the condemnation. She started with the forgery. She laid out the quitclaim deed, the fake signature, the attempted filing. She presented the scholarship waiver from 12 years ago as pattern evidence. She showed them how my father's handwriting leaned the same way in both forged signatures. She showed them my mother's emails arranging meetings with Silas behind my back. She showed the judge the text message where Sophie wrote, Dad says you won't notice until it's too late. The judge didn't just dismiss their claim. He referred the forgery to the district attorney. My father's face in that moment is burned into my memory. Not because he looked scared, because he looked offended, as if consequences were a hate crime. Now, here's the part that made Silas run, and my sister vanish like smoke. The part that turned their little scheme into a demolition derby. The $700,000 I put into that house? It wasn't a gift. It was a mechanic's lien registered against the LLC. Because I'm not sentimental. I'm precise. Every dollar I injected into that build was tracked. Every invoice filed. Every change order documented. My parents didn't know what a lien was. They just heard Alara is making it perfect, and assumed perfection meant obedience. But a lien is a claim. A stake. A quiet little knife you keep in your boot. When the house was condemned due to structural irregularities, which I reported, the LLC's insurance policy triggered a total loss payout. Not to them. To the lien holder. Me. My parents screamed in court about theft. Marin calmly explained, in language even a man like Arthur Hale couldn't bully. You don't get an insurance payout on an asset you don't own, especially when you attempted to illegally transfer it. The payout hit my account like a verdict. I got my $700,000 back, plus interest. Plus the payout for the destroyed structure. The house didn't just become worthless, it became expensive. And that expense was theirs. Because my parents, as life tenants who violated covenants, became liable for remediation. Meaning, they had to pay to remove the hazardous structure. They had to pay to clear the site. They had to pay for the very wrecking ball I'm watching swing right now. And since they didn't have the money, the court started seizing their remaining assets, including the Bali house, the one they thought they'd hidden, the one they bought for Sophie with my stolen scholarship money years ago. I found out about that house during discovery. Do you know what it feels like to read the deed of a property purchased with the life you were supposed to have? It felt like swallowing glass and realizing you're still hungry. So I did what I do best. I traced the money. I traced the paperwork. I traced the lies. And then I bought the debt. Because debt is just another kind of structure. And if you understand structures, you can own them. Silas disappeared first. He tried to call me, voice oily, offering deals. He tried to threaten me with lawsuits. Then he tried to quietly back out, but the county doesn't care about Silas's feelings. And neither do I. Sophie disappeared next. She went dark on social media. No more crystal mood boards. No more yacht Pinterest boards. No more manifestation coats. My mother called me from her lawyer's office and screamed so hard I had to hold the phone away from my ear. How could you do this? She shrieked. How could you destroy your own legacy just to hurt us? Legacy. That word again? I looked out the window of my office as she screamed, watching a steel frame rise on a project site across town. A structure built with honest labor, honest materials, honest ownership, and I realized my mother had never known what legacy meant. She thought legacy was a mansion you could show off in holiday photos. She thought legacy was a name that couldn't be questioned. She thought legacy was immunity. So I said calmly, I didn't destroy a legacy, Mom. She went quiet for a second, breathing hard. I cleared a site, I continued. You can't build anything worth keeping on a foundation of lies. I'm just doing what I was trained to do, removing the structural failure. She whispered, venomous. You're our daughter. I nodded to myself, even though she couldn't see it. And you were my parents. And somehow, that was the saddest part. Not the money, not the fraud, not even Milan. The saddest part was realizing they had never once loved me more than they loved what I could provide. Back in Aspen, the wrecking ball swings again. It strikes the last standing wall of the master suite. The sound is obscene, wood cracking, glass screaming, stone giving up. My father watches like he's attending his own funeral. My mother, handcuffed in the cruiser, is still yelling. She's yelling my name like it's a curse. Like I'm the villain in the story she planned to sell at her next brunch. I step closer to the edge of the rubble. The dust coats my blazer. My white heel is no longer pristine. Good. Pristine is for people who haven't been tested. A deputy stands nearby, arms crossed, keeping an eye on my father. Arthur's gaze darts to me. His voice is low when he finally speaks. You think you've won. I look at him and feel nothing but clarity. This was never a game, I say. It was a diagnosis. He scoffs weakly. You're heartless. I tilt my head. No, Dad, I'm accurate. He flinches like accuracy is the worst insult he's ever heard. That night, I stay in a hotel overlooking the mountains. I don't drink. I don't celebrate. I sit on the edge of the bed and hold that rusted iron key in my palm until the metal leaves a mark. Because the key is proof, not of the house, of the lesson. I think about my scholarship letter, about Milan, about the basement where I built my firm, about every time I swallowed anger to keep the peace. And I realize something that feels almost like relief. Peace bought with self-erasure is not peace. It's captivity. The next morning, I meet with a nonprofit organization that rehabs housing for refugee families. A colleague introduced me months ago. At the time, I'd donated money, signed checks, stayed distant, but now I'm there in person. In their office, the walls are covered in drawings, children made of houses, simple rectangles with bright windows, stick figure families standing outside under a sun that always looks happy. A woman named Nadia greets me. She has tired eyes and a spine made of steel. She shakes my hand and says, "You're the architect." "I am," I reply. She studies me. "They said you specialize in structural failure." "I do," I say, then glance at a child's drawing on the wall. "But I'd like to build something that doesn't collapse." Nadia smiles small, real. I nod once. "Good, because I'm done building for people who think they're entitled to my labor." My mother calls again. This time her voice is quieter, not softer. Just quieter, like someone who's run out of oxygen and still refuses to admit they're drowning. "Where will we go?" she asks, like the question is my responsibility. I stare at a spreadsheet on my laptop, budget lines for materials, labor, permits. A future that belongs to people who didn't steal it. "I don't know," I answer honestly. Silence. Then she says bitterly, "You've always been cold." I inhale slowly. "No," I say. "I've always been contained." "What's the difference?" she snaps. "The difference," I say, "is that coldness is empty. Containment is control." She huffs. "You really think you're better than us?" I glance at the iron key again, sitting on my desk like a relic. "I don't think I'm better," I say. "I think I'm done." She whispers, almost pleading, "Elara, we're family." And there it is, the crowbar word, the one they always use to pry open my boundaries. So I lean back in my chair and let my voice turn calm and final. "Family isn't a crowbar," I tell her. "It's a promise, and you broke it first." She starts to cry. I don't comfort her. Because comfort without accountability is just permission. Sophie ends up working at a coffee shop. Someone tells me weeks later one of my old high school classmates messages me, half gossiping, half amazed. Apparently Sophie hates the energy of the espresso machine. Apparently she tells customers their auras are stressed. Apparently she posts vague quotes online about betrayal and rebirth. But for the first time in her life, she is exchanging labor for money. No bailouts. No scholarships stolen. No family subsidies. Just reality. And reality is the only teacher she never managed to manipulate. My father is waiting for his court date. His world, built on intimidation and entitlement, has finally met a force it can't bully. Documentation. And me? I'm building a new house. Not for them. For a family that actually understands what it means to have a roof over their head. A home isn't marble counters. It isn't heated floors. It isn't glass walls overlooking a mountain. A home is safety. A home is stability. A home is the opposite of a lie. I drive past the Aspen lot one last time before I leave. The house is gone. Not remodeled. Not repurposed. Not leveraged. Gone. Just an empty scar of earth under a wide sky. The mountains stand indifferent in the distance, ancient and unmoved, like they've seen 1,000 families implode and still refuse to collapse themselves. I step out of the car. The wind is cold. It cuts through my blazer, sharp as truth. I walk to the center of the lot and stand where the living room used to be, where my mother once planned parties, where my father once stood like a king, where Sophie once took selfies and called it healing. Now it's silent. Honest. Clean. I take the iron key from my pocket. Hold it up. The sunlight catches the rust and makes it look almost beautiful. Not because it's pretty, because it's finished. Because it represents the moment I stop negotiating with people who never planned to respect me. I slide the key back into my pocket. Not because I need it, but because it reminds me. The most powerful thing you can ever build is a boundary no one, not even your own blood, can cross. CTA 2. If you saw that checkmate coming, comment checkmate below. And if you didn't, good. That means you're not the kind of person who plots against your own family. But you do need to learn how to protect yourself from people who would. There's a myth people love. That forgiveness is always noble. That boundaries are always cruel. That being the bigger person means letting someone take another bite out of you and calling it love. That myth is sold by the same kind of people who profit from your silence. Here's the truth. You can love someone and still refuse to fund their chaos. You can share DNA with someone and still deny them access. You can be kind and still be lethal when necessary. Because kindness without limits is just a slow suicide. My parents didn't lose a house. They lost their favorite illusion, that I would always be there, cleaning up, paying, smiling through my own erasure. They thought the foundation was mine to sacrifice. They were wrong. I didn't collapse. I documented the load. I found the crack. And I removed it. Because that's what I do. Weeks later, I'm on a different site. Not Aspen. A small neighborhood outside the city. A modest plot. A family stands nearby, 2 parents, 3 children, all watching as the first concrete is poured. The father's hands are rough. He holds his youngest on his hip. The mother keeps wiping her eyes, embarrassed to cry in public. They don't have designer shoes. They don't have luxury SUVs. They don't have a legacy. But they have something my parents never did. Gratitude without entitlement. The kids run around the site, laughing, chasing each other, making the dirt look like a playground. And for the first time in a long time, I feel something warm in my chest that isn't anger. It's purpose. Nadia walks up beside me and says quietly, "You okay?" I look at the wet concrete, fresh, clean, ready to hold weight. "I'm more than okay," I say, "because this foundation is real. No lies, no theft, no forged signatures, just a future that belongs to the people standing on it." I touch the iron key in my pocket once. A reminder. Then I let it go. Because I'm not building prisons anymore. I'm building exits. I'm building doors. I'm building homes that don't collapse when someone tries to leverage them. CTA 3. Don't let people use family as a crowbar to pry open your life. Build your boundaries in stone and keep the receipts. If this story hit you somewhere personal, share it with someone who needs permission to protect themselves. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next build.